Leading on this call along with me is Garrett Olson from Resolute Associates. Garrett was engaged with our organization prior to the COVID-19 emergency to work with us on a strategic plan, and he's working with us now on a response and recovery plan for COVID-19. And Garrett, good morning. It's nice to see you. It's a little bittersweet to see you with that no-go background.
I know. Can't wait for this to be back. So good morning, everybody, and happy Monday morning.
Yes, good morning to everybody. I wanted to just take a minute to reflect on the weekend that I had. I had a chance to reflect and pull back a little bit from the constant mayhem of working. And I, like many Americans or many people around the world, I decided to embark on doing a jigsaw puzzle. And I made the very audacious move of starting a 2,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. And it very much feels like an analogy for what we are doing right now, because the more you start to work on the puzzle, the more you realize how many pieces there are. I would find a piece and I would think, okay, this is where it goes. I would place it and I realized that was not the piece and it was not the way to solve the puzzle. So I thought that might be a way to just kind of give you a reality check for where we're at, and a reminder that we're all moving through this together, trying to figure it out one piece at a time. So on today's call, we have a really substantive group of people who are going to share with us. We have Judy Mahan from the SBDC. She'll be giving us an update on the EIDL and the PPP process. We also have Lorelei Capel from the Economic Vitality Corporation joining us to give us an update on what the EVC is doing. And then Shelly Stanwyck from the City of San Luis Obispo will be giving us an update on the city's economic recovery plan. And we invited her to come after she gave this presentation to City Council last week. And I thought it would be helpful for you all to hear this as well. So with that, let's go ahead and start moving through our call. Just a quick reminder about the Zoom overview. Garrett, if you want to talk about this.
Sure. You're probably all accustomed to Zoom right now, and you'll know that up in the upper right-hand corner, you can switch between speaker view and gallery view. Oftentimes, speaker view is more advantageous when we're reviewing a slide deck like the one that Bettina has put together. If you want to chat, you can send chat messages to any individual in the communication just by clicking on chat, selecting their name and sending them a message. And if you have a question, we ask that you post that question to everybody in the chat session.
Yeah, and we will try to answer those questions when it's appropriate and when it comes up in a topical way. So this is your Downtown SLO Board of Directors. I want to thank each and every one of you who are on the call right now. Thank you for volunteering your time and your expertise while your own businesses are swirling around you and you are trying to figure this out as well. Just a shout out to each of them. The Economic Activities Committee will be meeting this Thursday to discuss the possibility of inviting some private funding to come in and potentially start a economic relief program for some of our businesses. So hopefully we'll be able to give you an update on that process a little bit more next week. Just a reminder of where we are right now. We are very much still in the public health directives, and Garrett's going to talk a little more about that reality in just a minute. We're always trying to share information, and we are in the process where some of you have actually received economic relief, and some of you are still waiting. So at this time, we'd like to launch a quick poll and figure out how many of you, if you applied for either EIDL or PPP, did you apply A, and then please scroll down and answer if you have received any payment yet. This has been really interesting to see play out in the social media and also just kind of in our one-on-one conversations. We know that some of you have received funding, some of you have not received funding yet. And we expect that is going to change a little bit more. And we'll hear more from Judy about that in a minute. But we'll just keep this open for another few minutes. And while you are filling this out, I just want to remind everybody that there is relief and then there is recovery, and those are two different phases, right? So we are still in a public health emergency. We are looking for economic relief so that we can weather the public health emergency, and recovery is really still months away, and the recovery will likely take years. All right, I think some of you on the call have indicated to me privately that you're not going to be participating in the poll because you might represent a government agency, or perhaps you're working for an organization that isn't eligible for this type of funding. So I think that's probably what we're going to get on the poll. If you can go ahead and close those out. So it looks like we've got about 70% of you applied for both, and I can't actually see the poll sharing. Maybe you can see the percentages there. At any rate, thank you for taking part in that poll. That's really helpful. And Garrett, you want to take it away and talk a little bit about today's reality?
Yeah, so you probably saw at the end of last week, there was a pretty significant uptick in COVID cases in San Luis Obispo County. And the numbers really don't paint as dire a picture as the graphs would show to you. And that's really based on the method that the transmissions, those peak transmissions took place, as well as what we're seeing about the severity of those cases that are the reality in our county. And so where we had an anomalous 3-day uptick in cases, most, if not all of those, were person-to-person transmission rather than community transmission. So somebody that they already had an intimate, like household relationship with was the source of transmission, rather than getting it at work or at a restaurant or something like that, picking up food at a grocery store. And they actually saw an uptick in children getting the disease over that period of time. So ostensibly dependent children of people that had the disease, and transmission occurred in the home. Our hospitalizations is really the best measure of the severity of the disease, and our hospitalization numbers stay very, very low. 3 hospitalized right now, 1 in ICU. And we have not seen an increase in the number of deaths in quite some time, and we stand at 1. So contrary to what you may have heard on the Today Show, the county is not advocating that we will open on May 1st. It is still May 16th. And you're probably hearing more news about the potential of a second wave. Very recently, Dr. Briggs had announced that she anticipates that social isolation, physical distancing will become our reality likely throughout the entire summer, unless there is some significant medical breakthrough in the way that the disease is either treated or prevented.
Great. Thank you, Garrett. And we invited you to tell a little bit about some of the community needs that you're seeing through a different relationship you have with another organization.
Yeah, so as you may know, the food bank has been without a CEO for about the last 3 months, and this is a really challenging time for an organization like the food bank to be without leadership. And so a couple of weeks ago, actually 4 weeks ago, the food bank asked my consulting firm to step in on a temporary basis and provide some executive leadership. And this is, we report to the county every 2 weeks based on the relationship that I'll quickly highlight in just a second. But this is the information that we share with the county, and it's really indicative of the economic realities that are facing our community. And so real quickly, just to share with you, there are 3 ways that the food bank distributes food to people in need. That top left one is neighborhood food distribution. So that's food bank personnel going out and literally handing bags to people in need. Prior to COVID, about 30,000 individuals were served by the food bank. And you can see in the number of households served just through this one program, you're seeing our end of month projection for the end of April being 106% increase. It's just been accelerating at an exponential rate. The second way that the food bank provides food is through partner agencies. So agencies like Echo Shelter or Loaves and Fishes, we provide them food. They turn around and provide that food to their clients through their own kitchen or their own pantry. And you can see there as well, more than a doubling of food distribution since the COVID crisis. For partner agencies, the increase over time has been about 252%, and for the neighborhood food distributions, it's been about 285% increase over normal. That bottom left one is the graph showing the increase in home delivery to seniors and the medically fragile. And we see that continue to go up. But the interesting thing, and where this really does come back to some of the downtown businesses, was an announcement by Governor Newsom on Friday about a new program where FEMA and Cal OES would partner with the 211 system, so that information line. For our county, 211 is managed by the United Way. And restaurants would register with 211 to be able to provide meals to sheltering seniors and the medically fragile that would be covered first by FEMA at 75%, then by Cal OES at 75%, and then the balance of that would be covered by the county. That program is not up and running right now. We've reached out. We were as pleased and surprised to hear the governor's announcement as everybody else was. So we've immediately reached out to United Way and in our relationship with the county, looking at how we can get that program to San Luis Obispo County. We recognize that that program not only eases the burden on the system that already is providing meals to over 1,000 seniors a week, but also gets money in the hands of small business. And then that last graph on the bottom right really is what I use as the canary in the coal mine to understand what is happening in our community, socially, economically, and that is the number of people that show up at the food bank warehouse for food. So the food bank warehouse is not typically a distribution point. This is our warehouse, and we send food out into the community to be distributed in neighborhoods. And typically, the people that show up at the food bank looking for food are people that are quite literally lost and hungry. They've never experienced food insecurity before. They Google the food bank, they come up with the address, they show up here, and they ask us for food. We always give them food. We never turn away somebody that is hungry. And then we try to plug them into one of the three programs, the distribution program, the partner agency program, or the home delivery program. So you can see real quick, if you go back one, you can see real quick the rate of increase of people showing up at the food bank asking for food. Those people come here, we give them food, and then we plug them into one of the other distribution methods. So you can see that the rate of people in need continues to accelerate at an alarming rate. As those people show up at the food bank, the next week they show up at a distribution center, but we are still seeing a doubling of new people in need week over week.
Thank you, Garrett. And if you're wondering why we're sharing these slides with you, it's because at this point, our county has been relatively unaffected by the COVID-19 disease. And so in our county, what we're facing really is more of an economic disaster than a health disaster. And that isn't to underplay coronavirus or the disease, but what we're seeing, where we're really seeing an impact, is economically. And I think this is really important as we look to a summer without tourism in San Luis Obispo, which is, of course, for all of you, a huge driver to your businesses and a huge driver of visitors to our downtown. If we are relying on our local citizens to support and shore up our businesses, and they are having this kind of need right now, that paints a very different picture for us economically. So that's why we're raising this with you. So as for the question of reopening, as Garrett mentioned, there was an unfortunate mention on the National Today show that San Luis Obispo was opening May 1st, and that is not true. The county has created a task force for the roadmap to reopening SLO County. And last week I told you all that I have been, along with our board president, Pat Arnold, the downtown's teen sector lead. So we identified a group of people. Thank you to those of you who served on that sector group. We reviewed a very preliminary draft of the guidelines, and we will continue to be a part of that process. This is very much a phased reopening. So when we get the guidelines from the state that it's okay to reopen, that will be in physically distanced ways. That will be wearing masks. That will be not the new normal. It's not a light switch. And I know we've heard that all a lot before, but I think it bears repeating as we are trying to make plans. So these are some of our goals around this. Our objective is to reopen a clean, safe, prosperous, and welcoming space. We're looking to ensure sanitation and safety in our shared common areas. And we have some actual creative ideas about repurposing some of our public space in order to perhaps expand dining options into the sidewalk, even into the street, to reline some of our queuing areas so that people, when they're lining up to get into the shops, will have enough room to safely do so. But again, this is all under the guidance that it is only when it is appropriate to do so. And we have no indication from Governor Newsom that the relaxation of the shelter at home order is coming anytime soon, although he has laid out his 6-point plan. So with that, I'm going to call on Judy to give us an update on what's going on with the SBDC.
Thanks, Bettina. Great to see you all this morning. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So yeah, the PPP applications are live again today. So we're encouraging our clients to connect with their lenders to make sure that they either have submitted their PPP loan application or that they can complete one and submit it as soon as possible. So applications are being accepted for the PP loan starting today. Oh, I'm not talking loud enough. Okay. Is the sound okay? Yeah? Okay, thank you. The EIDL loan, the EIDL portal should be back up and running today. I just checked it just a few minutes ago. I'm not seeing it live yet, but it should. We were told it would be back up this morning by 10 a.m. It's 10:20 now. It's not seeming to be open quite yet, but we should keep an eye out on that. I will likely encourage, I think I'll talk to my staff to make sure that we do an e-blast as soon as it's up and running. So keep an eye out for that as well. We have received some additional guidelines from the SBA on the PPP loan. And the first thing I'm going to do is in the chat screen, I'm going to share a link because step one is all about your loan calculation for PPP. How do you calculate the loan amount that you're entitled to request when you make your application? You fill out the borrower form. So if you look in the chat room, in the chat box right now, I'm sending to everyone the clarification that came from the Treasury. If you click on that link, it's from the Treasury Department. It will list out by legal entity type all the different scenarios on how to calculate your payroll for sole proprietors, for S Corps, C Corps. It breaks it all down, very precise examples on how that works. I encourage you, if you have questions about how to calculate your loan amount, to check out this document, see if your questions are being answered here. This document has been shared with our accountants locally, so they're all up to speed on all these questions that we had last week. I think it's very helpful. It gives some rather precise information. And so I'm not going to go through the document now because there are too many variables, too many, it really depends on what type of legal entity you are, what type of filing you're doing, under what, if you're sole proprietor, an independent contractor, different rules apply. So I encourage you to check this document first. I am going to touch on some frequently asked questions that we've seen over the last week that will affect applications today. One that has come up very frequently is there is a $100,000 limit on the amount you can claim for payroll for employees and for owners of businesses. Anything in excess of $100,000 per year per person cannot be included in the PPP calculation. However, this does not apply to non-cash benefits. So any additional payments made by the business towards retirement plans, group health care, insurance, employee taxes, you can add that back into your calculation. You can also include any payments you've made for vacation, sick, parental, and family leave. You can add that back into your calculation. So that allows you to increase that loan calculation amount. Another question that we've had very frequently is if you're a seasonal business. We've had seasonal businesses, they have more intensive activity at certain times of the year. How do they calculate and give a correct picture of what their average payroll is during that time? The SBA has authorized these businesses to look at an 8-week period between February 15, 2019 and June 30th, 19. And if that touches on the seasonality of your business, you can use that time period to get a better number. Let's see, what else did we see? If you were not in business in 2019, you can use the average payroll during January 1, 2020 and February 29, 2020. So you can use those 2 first months, January and February of this year, to calculate your average payroll if you were not in business in 2019. Back to the total payment amount, any payments made to independent contractors, to sole proprietors cannot be included in the calculation of payroll. You cannot add those amounts in there. Again, the thought process behind that is that independent contractors, sole proprietors can apply for PPP themselves. So you cannot include those payments that you made as a business owner to independent contractors or sole proprietors in the payroll amount that you're trying to calculate for your business. The payroll is calculated on a gross basis, but you must include amounts that you paid as an employer for payroll taxes. That was a little specification that we got. A lot of questions around the forgiveness amount of the loan. So that piece, we will be getting more clarification in the same way that I shared the document about the loan calculation amount. We expect to see some very specific guidelines on the forgiveness portion. And that's something that's going to kick in the next 4 to 6 weeks. People are going to have a lot of questions about that. So number one, the forgiveness, the time period during which you must spend down that loan to get forgiveness starts from the date you obtain the first disbursement from the lender, from the bank. The bank must disburse the money to the borrower within no later than 10 days from approval of the loan. So if you want to try and save yourself another 10 days before you bring employees back on board, you could have a discussion with your bank and ask them to wait 10 days. That's a strategy I was thinking of this morning because we're seeing business owners who want to delay the time from which they obtain that first disbursement of funds. Because then that gives them more time to see what's going on with the business, to see how many employees they can rehire back. So we totally understand that we need to find little strategies to help employers delay that time from which the clock starts ticking. Let's see what else. And just confirming again that anyone in the ag industry, farmers, can apply for the PPP loan as long as they have less than 500 employees, or that they are below a certain revenue mark, depending on what type of industry they're in, what type of farming that they're doing. So those are kind of some of the key highlights, but most importantly, I shared the guidelines, which just came out on the loan calculation amount. Lots of great examples there. Read it thoroughly. And yeah, that's it for the updates for now.
Great. Thank you so much, Judy. We really appreciate your really keen insight. It's so thorough, and you understand these things way more than we do. So thank you. Great news about the envelope as well.
Thank you.
Okay, and next up, we are going to invite Lorelei from the EVC to tell us a little bit about what's sorry, I've got some issues here. What's going on for the EVC? What are you guys working on right now? Oh, I'm sorry, I switched over something. Judy, you will be also giving a detailed webinar on this on April 30th from 2 to 3 p.m. and the chamber is unable to be on the call today. So they asked me to share this information with you all. They're also conducting a survey, and we hope that you can take that as well. And now I will invite Lorelei from the EBC to give a brief update.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. It's good to see everybody's faces. Thanks again for having me today. I just wanted to kind of respond to Bettina's question specifically of what is the EBC's response to COVID-19 and the role in economic recovery that we'll be playing as we move forward. I have a couple things I'd like to touch on. Next slide. So I'll just go through these pretty quickly, but I'll focus on the highlights. Next slide. As soon as the world changed as we know it, we kind of jumped in just like most organizations and put up a COVID-19 website for a one-stop shop for business resources. We've been coordinating with many on that and trying to fold in all of the great information that's been coming from Judy into all of these, into our webpage. So you can click on that at any time. We also have a business resource guide that we put together that's been really helpful, and in that are kind of one-stop shop places you can go to, such as SBDC and others, to kind of find advice depending on where you are and what your unique situation is, HR advice and so forth. Next slide. We're also maintaining kind of providing our business support services. So every time a business comes to us, and right now we're working with probably 20 or 30, they are needing access to capital or help filling out loans. That's not our role, so we have partners that we of course send them to, but a lot of companies are actually pivoting and changing and looking for access to talent right now. They've changed their model as a result of COVID-19 and are asking us to kind of help partner with our workforce development partners to find them the right people. And the Workforce Development Board's been really instrumental in that as well. Access to facilities, I think that's going to change a lot. That's something we do. We help kind of pair and partner companies who've outgrown their space or would like to reduce their space, or companies that would like to relocate to the Central Coast. We've been able to kind of work with our city partners in finding them locations, or even through just our internal network of EBC board members and sponsors. We've been able to kind of make a couple calls and help people shuffle spaces when they outgrow or need a different kind of floor plan. So just recently we were able to bring a company from Canada who wanted to have a local office here on the Central Coast, and they in the biomedical field, and they are now in Atascadero. So it was exciting that things are still moving and shuffling in the right direction. But then most of my presentation I'll focus on this Employer Talent Connection website. So we convene industry clusters and have some great conversations as monthly, quarterly, depending on the industry cluster. But our tech cluster convened last year at about this time and decided they had a specific need, and we kind of talked about what that could look like. And they kind of said, we'd really like to create a tool that can help us promote the region to other people outside the area. So what we designed and scoped out with the help of folks from Amazon, CleverDex, Whitebox, and so many others was a Employer Talent Connection website. And this is kind of an outline of the feature: work, live, explore, and what's happening. That's kind of our outline. This wasn't originally created for COVID, but we realized there's a huge need, and we'll be launching that this week. So look for that in kind of out in the media. Next slide. So the highlight feature of this is a web mapping tool. This looks a little distorted, sorry. Where we've actually been able to export from our database all of the companies here in the region per industry cluster: manufacturing, healthcare, energy, tourism, wine, ag, and so forth, and kind of allow people seeking jobs to look at all of the companies here and show the breadth and depth of our region. And they can click on that and look at job postings that they have on their careers page, or they can just search by industry, they can search by name, by location, they can view the company's website. We're going to eventually get social media up and connected so they can kind of get to know the owners of the business, the company culture, and then of course they can search job listings through all of the local, slowjobs.com or indeed.com, other places to look as well. So that's kind of a really interesting thing that's kind of floated to the top of what can we be doing to help at this time? So getting this off the ground as soon as possible, and making it a resource so that people who are out of work now and are pondering their next job can be looking for where they're going to land next is really important. And we really want to figure out how we can help. And we've partnered with so many people on this. We've gotten, hundreds of people feedback. We've partnered with our workforce development partners. So we've got a lot of eyes on it and a lot of help and support. So we appreciate everybody who's given some feedback there. Next slide. One of the other things this website does is kind of shows not just a qualitative, but a quantitative reason of why San Luis Obispo County is a great place to live and work. So if you're up in the Bay Area, or if you're in Minnesota, wherever you may be, we're kind of putting our best foot forward and showing, we have been deemed by National Geographic as the top 5 happiest cities in the U.S. and we're halfway between Los Angeles and San Francisco. So our location has been very desirable to a lot of the companies who have come here and relocated here, and that's a really big selling point. So I think that's kind of one of the goals of this site as well. And of course, we link to our partners at Visit SLOCal so they can explore all the beauty of the Central Coast and figure out what's going on and how they connect. Next slide. One of the big pieces of work we've been working on since 2017 is the EDC's convened a workforce development task force. And now with response to COVID, more than ever, it's important for us to stay connected. We connect with Cal Poly Career Services, Cuesta College Career Services, Workforce Development Board, Chamber, and County Office of Education and SLO partners to provide data through our economic dashboard. But now we're pivoting and kind of looking at that data in a different way. Where is the need? What businesses are most vulnerable right now? And kind of sharing that information amongst our teammates and figuring out how we're going to kind of shift and align and who needs. Right now we'll be working with Workforce Development Board to kind of help fill some of the roles of the companies that are hiring immediately, as we're getting in some of the job descriptions specifically written for this shift. It'll be really helpful to kind of connect with that. There's also a lot of work that's coming out of SLO partners and County Office of Ed to create some apprenticeship programs. And you've seen a lot in the news of that. So we'll see kind of how COVID-19 kind of affects that over the years. So one of the big things we've done, and I don't think we have time for this, but I'll just show you, in the last year, we just launched these career kind of employer talent connection videos. And we have a series of videos from every different industry sector, a couple different industry sectors, of career pathways and how people have taken their local education pathway to a head of household career here. And I think now that we're in online learning at the elementary schools and high schools and I guess K through 16 really, we thought it would be a really great time to share the videos that we put together as part of online learning and show, how people actually, as they're pondering their career and they're sitting at home and their teachers are thinking of new coursework, to help them build their resume and ponder their career path or build their LinkedIn profiles. We're releasing these videos kind of to help and connect with the Talent Connection website as well, so people can explore companies here on the Central Coast, so we can send a really clear message to our talent that are, growing here in our pipelines, to stay here locally. You don't have to leave to get great job experience and to make a head of household wage. So, these are kind of just a way to work with our partners in education who are kind of rethinking their model. And then our industry clusters, this is a big piece of what we do. The Knowledge and Innovation, or Tech Cluster, as I mentioned, was really instrumental in helping us build the talent website that I just showed you. Health services, we just convened recently with a subgroup to kind of talk about business advisory and mentorship for startups. We've been working with folks like Sydney Collin from DR Devices to kind of understand what her growing needs were over time. She's had great mentorship through the Hot House, and we're kind of trying to figure out how we can leverage some of the great companies here on the Central Coast to build a group of advisors and a bench list to help businesses grow as we kind of recover from COVID, or when their needs change and they just need to look at a new model. So we'll be kind of reaching out to partners to figure out what that roster looks like and what our process looks like. And then finally, as we move forward, we'll be looking and thinking about broadband. I'm sure you've all experienced some broadband issues or bandwidth issues. And so we're going to be, you know, kind of thinking about how to bring our partners from the Broadband Consortium Pacific Coast to the Central Coast to make a bigger impact. And that might be through a broadband summit. You know, maybe it'll be a virtual summit now instead of an in-person summit, as we were planning for fall of 2020. And then finally,
Lorelei, can I just give you a 10-second warning to wrap up? We've just got a couple more key speakers.
Oh yeah,
awesome.
This is our last slide. You've got it. So Bettina already covered this. So the county recovery team, as we mentioned, as she already covered, we've been engaging industry leaders to help support this effort and review, and Bettina already kind of said it all. So that's what the EVC's been doing to kind of support the COVID response and recovery.
Thank you so much, Lorelei. We really appreciate that update and all you're doing for the economic recovery as a whole. And I want to just thank you, especially for that broadband piece, because I think we've all sort of discovered that the internet is really a utility at this point in order for us to all do our work. So I'm glad that that conversation is happening out there. And we are actually running a little bit short on time, so I'm gonna delay questions until the end because we would love to invite Shelly Stanwyck up from the City of SLO now to talk about the city's efforts toward economic recovery and resiliency.
Thank you, Bettina. Can you hear me, everyone?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so I'm really glad to be able to spend a few minutes with you this morning, and I'm going to try and hit the highlights of a presentation that I gave to council last Tuesday night. And really it was to inform the council and those of you who were watching the meeting how the city is planning to assist you, your businesses, your properties, and our town in our recovery effort. And this particular presentation obviously is not about when we reopen. That's an entirely separate work effort that's being undertaken, as Bettina's mentioned. But really, this is about how we come together as staff, how we pivot, how we refocus, and how we do the important recovery work ahead together with our community partners. So on the next slide, it just really is intended to let you know that in our today's very imperfect and challenging world, we're working on a strategic roadmap. We face so many unknowns that we're trying to get our strategies in place and our resources in place to face these changing conditions. And the next slide shows us that as of last week, what the COVID impacts are to the city of San Luis Obispo. We obviously monitor these daily to our organization, and as you can see, we have a significant budget deficit that is growing daily. As of today, we have 200 fewer staff than we did in March. We have a flexible workforce, and with the closure of so many programs, we have no work presently for our supplemental employees, and they are no longer working for us. At the same time, your staff are fulfilling essential duties at this time on top of regular duties, and we are very busy. The next slide just highlights what the city, in the face of this economic uncertainty, we've obviously taken action. We've taken action to develop a framework, and we're doing this to support you, our residents, our businesses, our community partners, and our very own organization. On the next slide, you see a few of the things we've already done as an organization. Most importantly, we triggered our fiscal health contingency plan, which basically means freezing and chilling positions and hiring and spending. Since March, we've had an EOC operating, and we added an economic recovery branch a few weeks ago that I'm chairing. Also, we're partnering with the county, with REACH, with the EVC, with the Downtown Association, with other cities on the Central Coast to make sure that we're focusing everybody in this relief phase on where to get relief and to centralize information so that individuals can get it as quickly as possible. And then we're establishing our own organizational internal framework. On the next slide, it highlights what the intersection of these planning efforts really looks like. Obviously, we're following established government roles and responsibilities and funding. And so we're working in concert with the state of California, with the county of San Luis Obispo, with REACH, who's been appointed by the county to focus on regional economic recovery. And then the city as a whole is working on our own reopening and recovery plan. So our plans are nested within these, and we're working on this project planning and strategy effort right now. The next slide was to remind our viewers, and I think with Judy on this call, you know this, and that's where to go to get information. And we're just really trying to make sure that the city is a conduit for information during this relief phase so we can make it easier on you. The next slide shows really the different roles and responsibilities and how the city relates to other economic agencies, partners, and business. And as you can see, we're nested within that, and we are working very closely with our partners in this effort. Next slide. This really focuses on why we have a project plan at the city for our own recovery. In addition to these great partnerships and resources and connecting our residents and businesses to them, we know the city must have its own strategies unique to San Luis Obispo. And so that is that's the purpose of our planning efforts. And that's to identify what we can do, how we may need to change processes or policies, how we may need to reprogram staff. All of that is underway so that when we reopen, we are better ready to serve what our community needs. The next slide really shows one of the focus that we have, and that is that we are stronger together in San Luis Obispo. We are planning to be ready to recover, but we are planning to engage our residents, businesses, and our customers like we really never have in the past with our economic development program. As Bettina mentioned in her earlier remarks, it is incumbent upon us to make sure that our residents are able to come into our community when it is safe and support their local businesses. That will be key both as a workforce and for the support of their businesses. So that is one of our core principles. And I think we condensed the slides, but just to, before we jump on to the next one, I just want to make sure that you're aware that the city of San Luis Obispo has pivoted as a team, and all staff are involved in supporting economic resiliency and recovery. The city manager, of course, Derek, is leading this effort with our regional partners. As your assistant city manager, I oversee 4 departments that provide operating and day-to-day support of our community. And so I'm working with community development, parks and recreation, public works, and utilities in making sure we're ready to support this recovery. Our deputy city manager, Greg Herman, is leading the day-to-day, the communications, and the oversight of key economic development programs, including economic development, tourism, and cannabis. And then all of your other city departments will be involved in this effort. This has never happened before, and it represents a very focused, a very purposeful and coordinated effort that will be supported by staff working together in teams. We're working on these plans so that we can clearly identify roles and responsibilities as well as strategies and tactics. On the next slide, it really shows how we're also in this together with our community stakeholders. We know we have as staff very defined roles, but we will be broadening, enhancing, and re-emphasizing our partnerships with Cal Poly, the Downtown Association, industry-specific businesses, you as local leaders, our workforce, and of course, our residents. Communication will play a key role in this, and we're looking forward to enhancing those efforts. On the next slide, I just want to touch on how we have broken this effort out. And there's really several phases of focus. The first is the phase we're in right now, and that is relief. That is our communications with business, identifying what they need and connecting them with resources. We move into recovery with strategies and tactics that will be presented to the council on June 2nd, and prioritization of capital improvement projects that hopefully stimulate that local economy. Then we will move into continued recovery and reinvention and resiliency. The next slide shows you that, of course, our relief efforts are already underway, and I hope that many of you are seeing the benefits of the SLO takeout and delivery map and the virtual shopping map. We are working through our tourism manager, Molly Kano, on their response plan. We've given some relief with transient occupancy tax through council decisions. If you are a developer or designer, you can now submit plans online and pay online. And we've really enhanced our website to make sure information is centralized. On the next slide, it just hits some of the highlights about our communication efforts and re-emphasizes how the city is playing a role as a connector and making sure that we release information to both our consumers and our businesses. The next slide talks really about what we are going to be doing in June when we propose to council a roadmap to the city's economic recovery and resiliency. That document will have a statement and purpose for the council, and it will take our council's goals and turn them into one goal so that the entire city, all staff, are focused on achieving and accomplishing our recovery goal. We will have clearly defined strategies with lead departments and staff with tactics underneath. And of course, all of our partnership efforts will be acknowledged in it. I want to let you know that last week we launched a pulse survey that will help us inform these strategies. We've received well over 1,000 responses with very clear trends and needs being identified. Also today, something hopeful, the repair work has started on the parking arch in preparation for the mural that's going to go over the parking arch on Marsh Street. And this is a photo of what that will look like. Thanks to the Downtown Association's effort, Bettina's suggestion, our public art program, and our parking program, we have, and the promotional coordinating committee, we've been able to undertake this effort. And then the next slide hits really the highlights of the actions that we intend to identify and take with our roadmap to recovery. Of course, we have to have that roadmap developed. We will be engaging our stakeholders in this process throughout. We'll be working through the survey and with feedback from local businesses and residents about your needs. It will be consistent with our visions for the community, especially councils. There'll be data and demographics and trends, and we'll take bold actions, and we expect to do business differently. And then the next slide hits the results, which obviously our intention is to recover economically, as well as build community and business resiliency, and focus on a lot of the objectives we have had in our major city goal for a vibrant and vital downtown, which focus on cleanliness and safety, and also a diversified local economy. And with the last slide, the next steps, we intend to continue to develop these strategies and tactics. Your staff work each and every day right now on all sorts of things. We'll be engaging our residents and businesses, obviously, and our partners. And then June 2nd, as I mentioned, will be the council meeting where we present our strategies, which will, as I mentioned before, focus on downtown vitality and how we reopen. We're working on some of your suggestions as well. We started that over this weekend when we received some of them about how we can best utilize the public right-of-way to address some of the spacing needs that businesses are anticipating needing. I have a team that I've already appointed. They're at work on it, and I have a call today as well as tomorrow, and we will be getting on that as quickly as possible. Your staff are responding to issues as they're identified. We're assigning quick response work teams to focus in on it and identify solutions and strategies as quickly as possible, which is why you've seen us be able to take what could have been a months-long process and turn on digital planning and other things. So we are very focused on addressing your needs, and certainly appreciate when Bettina reaches out and identifies those for us. I know that she and Gavin have been hard at work on creative solutions and using the parking program to help the downtown recover by not charging for parking, and that will be our recommendation to council many months to come, so that we can again incent our residents, customers, and staff back into downtown safely. And with that, I'll stop talking because I know your time is precious and time was short.
Thank you very much, Shelly. Really appreciate that thorough update, and especially the good news about parking. We often say at Downtown SLO that if it's not actually a meeting if we don't talk about parking at least. So, appreciate the thoroughness there. So we have a few minutes left on today's call, and as usual, we are going through our polls. Each week we issue a number of polls. And this week we decided, in addition to showing you what those results were for the last week, we'll also be showing you some trends. And Garrett, if I could call on you to walk us through these a little bit.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you again, Shelly, and all of the other presenters today. And as Bettina mentioned, we want to show you the snapshot of where you were last week. But as we continue to evolve this dialogue, and really the interest is positioning downtown San Luis Obispo to advocate for those things that are most pressing to each of you. We want to make sure that we highlight those trends and where your needs are. So as of last week, we saw that your needs predominantly were for immediate access to stimulus funds, and you can go ahead and go forward one more slide. And you can see that is a trend that has been increasing over time. And unfortunately, we're seeing the response of my businesses on sure financial footing start to decrease. And you can see the relationship between needing access to stimulus funds and the financial footing of your businesses. We also are seeing an increase in immediate access to cash as a need, and a stabilization, a consistent need at just below 20% of people looking for rent relief. Next. Over the next week, most pressing issue is the long-term, the lack of short-term revenue from customers and clients. And this has been pretty consistent. The entrepreneurship of downtown businesses has been consistent throughout, that the change, the pivot to continue to be relevant to your customers has been incredibly admirable over this entire time. Let's go next. Which of the following would you like to see Downtown SLO advocate for you? And you see that the rent freeze or assistance, as we saw previously, that continues to be a consistent need. And that is the value of having folks like Shelly Stanwyck on the phone to help take that message back to City Council. Next. Again, we can see that rent assistance and stabilization, it has been the highest need for you, and has not dipped. All of the other needs articulated in that question are about a third the interest of assistance with downtown rents. So this one identifies what your current employee-employer payroll reality is. We see a pretty good mix here with the highest number of people who continue with pre-COVID staffing and don't anticipate changing that. That's fantastic, but as we take a look over time, we see that rate of people, businesses that continue with their pre-COVID levels is now starting to take a dive over the last 2 weeks, and a significant increase in those who have layoffs greater than 50% to staff. So really, it is unfortunate, but very helpful for us to be able to realize your experience and share that information with our elected officials. The level of certainty that your business will open at the previous levels of service and activity remains high if you combine the two, but you can see there again that significant dip in those who had very high hopes of reopening at the previous level, and we can see that low and very low is starting to creep up. So, and our highest now is uncertainty. And we feel that, and we hope to position your downtown staff and board to be able to advocate for things that will provide relief.
This is the one that really stuck out to me as very telling, as the reality around us continues to unfold and we try to put those puzzle pieces in the right place. This is the one that made my heart sink along with that line. So with that, oh, I guess there's one more, sorry.
So last week we started asking you about your experience with PPP and the EIDL loan. We saw that the vast majority of you had applied for both. And so I don't think we have a trend on that one, but we're going to go ahead and launch today's poll, which will be the same questions and will allow us next week to report as these trends continue.
And in the interest of time, while we're asking these questions, I'm going to just go through a couple other slides for you. I do want to remind you that our Downtown SLO team is here for you. Our team is working remotely for the most part. Our ambassadors, Austin and Stefan, are putting the wheels in place to come up with a plan for them to go back into service. And we're hoping that we'll have an update about when that service will begin soon. But we're here for you. We want to hear from you, and it's been really great to connect with you, even though it is in a virtual space. We have had a wonderful response to our public art program, this Mayflower initiative that we've started. We have 27 participating businesses so far, and you'll start to see these bright, colorful flowers pop up in the downtown windows. And we're inviting the public to view those windows from the safety of their cars, or maybe while they're out taking a responsible, socially distanced bicycle ride. And that will be a really fun way for us to kind of enliven and make downtown bright and colorful, because we know that this is a vibrant space, even though it is not that way at the time. I also want to give a shout out. One of the reasons that we're moving through our agenda a little quickly today is that on Instagram today at 11, our ambassador Austin Bertucci, who many of you know, will be going live on Instagram with a couple of our downtown business owners. So he will be meeting with Chris from Passport, with Brittany from The Ritual, with Mary Alice from Blackwater, and the Call from the Sock Drawer. So just check that out in the Instagram live feature. This is the first time we're launching that, and we're hoping that that'll be a great way of engaging some more people. So I was on a call this morning. We continue to be a part not just of the local, city, and county efforts of understanding the COVID-19 crisis and responding to it, but also connecting with downtown leaders across sectors. So this morning I was on a call with the International Downtown Association. We do weekly calls with CEOs. It was a really interesting group this morning. There were people from Vancouver, British Columbia, and Canada who are about a week behind where the United States is, and have, I think, actually are in a little bit of a corollary situation to San Luis Obispo County, because they have not had the extreme number of cases that some other American cities have had. They're cautiously moving into a little bit more of an aggressive reopening campaign, potentially. And then on the other side of the coin, I got to hear from the Atlanta Downtown Association. They oversee a gigantic footprint in downtown Atlanta with, gosh, I think 120 acres and huge skyscrapers, residences, businesses, construction projects coming out of the ground, major cultural centers. And Georgia, as you know, has been one of the first states to try to implement a reopening campaign. And there's a lot of confusion going on there. So it continues to be really interesting to connect with these other leaders in the field and to hear about what we're coming up with, kind of sometimes it feels like we come up with a brand new idea, and these ideas are taking shape in other communities as well. So lots of cities are looking at repurposing sidewalks and parking and turning those into shared dining areas in order to give greater capacity to restaurants so that they can continue to be financially solvent in the new phased reopening. And to hear from them about how they're running their clean and safe programs so that we can safely get our ambassadors back into service, as well as some larger conversations about public events and large scale events. The majority of the people on the call today, we did a little poll amongst the International Downtown Association CEOs, just like you're doing one now. And the overall feedback about when downtowns in general anticipate bringing in large-scale events back to their downtown public spaces is not until spring 2021. So that's a really interesting kind of sobering moment, and that is what I continue to do, and our team works. And it looks like we have a couple of questions. Garrett, you mentioned there's a question here. Oh, it's from Stephen. Hi, Stephen. On NPR this morning. Yes, so Assemblyman Jordan Cunningham authored a letter that was signed with a couple of SLO County supervisors as well as many mayors of cities around the county. And they were requesting that they be given permission from the state and the governor to try to reopen May 1st. And I think that's where some of this confusion around May 1st being the deadline. I, again, do not have any information around whether May 1st will be that day, but there was a letter that was circulated. And maybe somebody could look that up and find it. There is a news story in that. That was not a very clear answer, but you know, sometimes when you say you don't know, that is the best answer, because I truly don't know what's going to be happening. But I don't think that May 1st will be our deadline at this moment in time. We may hear something very different in just a few minutes. However.
It looks like Shelly Stanwyck has some feedback.
I can tell you that we won't be opening May 1st to anyone at the city's knowledge. They're working on the plan to reopen that would come from our county health officer. The orders must stem from Dr. Bornstein. Currently, the state of California has an order that we shelter at home through May 15th. So the state must lift that order or modify it before the local jurisdictions can continue with their own more independent orders. And so right now we're not opening on Friday. I'm sure of that. And many of us were working to correct some misunderstandings about that over the weekend and such because of the Today Show. So what was trying to be clarified was that we as a county are doing well, and we have health officials, physicians developing on a plan to reopen that I know Bettina has assisted with. And so that will stem from a health and safety standpoint, and we must have direction from the state before the county can chart its own course, which is unlikely to be independent at this time, given how things have been trending at the state and how everyone is coordinating at a state level and responding to those orders.
Great, thank you, Shelly, appreciate that. And I do know that from the county recovery, roadmap to recovery effort, the plan is to perhaps release those guidelines on May 1st. So that might be why there is some confusion around that date. Any other questions before we call our Monday morning tradition to an end today? Okay, well, our next meeting will be on May 4th. Please tell a friend to join us if you find these meetings helpful. We really enjoy seeing all of you. We appreciate your time and also your very thoughtful considerations for how each of your businesses will be responding and trying to figure out these complex situations that we're all living in. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and I know I still have about 800 pieces of my 2,000 piece puzzle to put together. So again, thank you. And at this time, we will call the meeting to a close.